Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Boxiest, and today we are going to continue the What If series. What if events had gone differently? And in this What If, we're going to change the history of Cobra Kai. What if Sato trained Kreese and Silver during the events of the Karate Kid? So in this timeline, Kreese would still join the US military, but in this timeline, Kreese and Terry Silver would be deployed to Okinawa, and in Okinawa, they would be trained by Sato. Sato would train Kreese and Silver along with a lot of American soldiers, and he would teach them the aggressive form of Miyagi-Do. Kreese and Terry Silver would master their defense, so in this timeline, they would never learn the way of the fist, and they wouldn't learn the no mercy philosophy. Kreese and Terry Silver would continue their training, and they would still be deployed to Vietnam to continue fighting in the war. Kreese and Terry Silver would still form their bond, and Kreese would still save Terry Silver countless different ways. Eventually, Kreese and Terry Silver would go back to the US, and they would still want to open up their own karate dojo using what they learned. So they would still open up Cobra Kai in this timeline, and they would keep the Cobra Kai name, but it would be very similar to Miyagi-Do. And over the years, Kreese would continue running Cobra Kai, teaching his students the aggressive form of Miyagi-Do. Johnny would still join Cobra Kai in this timeline, and he would learn Miyagi-Do, but in this timeline, Johnny and the rest of the Cobra Kais wouldn't be bullies, and even after the war, Terry Silver would still pay for him and Kreese to go back to Okinawa to continue training with Sato, and Kreese and Terry Silver would meet Chosen, and the events of Karate Kid would still happen. Daniel would still move to the valley, and he would still be invited to hang out at the beach. He would still see Ali there, so Daniel and Ali would still talk, but this is when Johnny and the rest of the Cobra Kais would show up, and he would want to go talk to Ali, but Ali wouldn't want to talk to Johnny, and Daniel would still want to interfere with Ali's radio, but Johnny would tell Daniel that this doesn't concern him, and he would kindly ask Daniel to mind his own business. Eventually Ali would cave, and she would talk to Johnny. So in this timeline, Johnny and Daniel wouldn't be enemies, and over the next few days, Daniel and Ali would still become friends, but Ali would get back together with Johnny, and because Daniel was friends with Ali, Daniel would eventually become friends with Johnny as well, so Daniel would start to form an interest in joining Cobra Kai. So in this timeline, Daniel would join Cobra Kai, and he would start learning Miyagi-Do, and sometimes at his apartment complex, Daniel would be practicing his moves. Mr. Miyagi would be working around the building, and he would recognize some of Daniel's moves. Mr. Miyagi would ask where Daniel learned karate, so Daniel would say that he was in Cobra Kai. So Mr. Miyagi would still show up at the Cobra Kai dojo, and he would be surprised to see the students practicing Miyagi-Do. Mr. Miyagi would ask Kreese where he learned karate, and Kreese would say that Sato trained him. Mr. Miyagi would be surprised to hear Sato's name after all these years, and Mr. Miyagi would say that he used to be friends with Sato. Kreese would be surprised because he wouldn't know the history between Mr. Miyagi and Sato. So in this timeline, Kreese and Mr. Miyagi would become friends, and the events of the Karate Kid would continue. So in this timeline, Daniel wouldn't train with Mr. Miyagi, and he would continue training at Cobra Kai, learning Miyagi-Do from Kreese. In the night of the All Valley, Johnny would still be the All Valley champion, and months would pass. Mr. Miyagi would still get a letter from Okinawa telling him that his father was sick, so Mr. Miyagi would go to Okinawa, and the events of Karate Kid 2 would continue. Sato would still want to fight Mr. Miyagi, and Mr. Miyagi would tell Sato that he knows Kreese, but Sato wouldn't be impressed, and he would still think Mr. Miyagi was a coward. The events of Karate Kid 2 would still happen. Mr. Miyagi's dad would still pass away, and eventually Mr. Miyagi would agree to fight Sato, but just before the fight, the hurricane would still happen, and Mr. Miyagi would still save Sato's life, and by the end, Sato and Mr. Miyagi would become friends again. So Mr. Miyagi would go back to the US, and the events of Karate Kid 3 would be pretty uneventful. Daniel would continue training at Cobra Kai, and since Johnny was too old to compete, Daniel would want to be the next All Valley champion, and Kreese would help Daniel train for the All Valley, and the night of the All Valley, Daniel would be the All Valley champion, and he would win using Miyagi-Do. And that is where I'm going to end this What If. Thank you guys for watching. What do you guys think would have happened if Sato trained Kreese and Terry Silver? Let me know in the comments below. YouTube lets me know that the majority of you are not subscribed, so if you guys could subscribe, that would be much appreciated. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And I'll see you guys next time.